What is up, my friends? Today we are going to have a fun conversation about walking baits. Now, this isn't just any conversation. This is a mistakes video. These are 3 mistakes that I either see people make, like when I fish with Griff, he's making them all the time, or they're mistakes that I help diagnose either on DM or here in the store, that I see a repetitiveness enough to where I thought it was important to sit down and have a conversation, especially going into such a fun walking bait season. So if you'd like to join in on a fun conversation and let me talk about 3 mistakes I see people make a lot and make sure you're not making them and maximizing your fun this fall, let's go. Welcome back, my friends. I am Ben with the Hookup Tackle, the Tackle Otaku on Instagram, being joined by my buddy David. Today, David, we are going to have a conversation about walking baits. This is one of my favorite styles of fishing lures. It's one of the, in my opinion, one of the most fun ways to fish. Everybody loves being able to twitch a bait on the surface and get it smashed. However, it's such a wide category. There's so many different styles of baits, so many different sounds, so many different movements, that it just creates a lot of opportunities to make mistakes, right? And so today we're going to talk about 3 mistakes that I see happening a lot to hopefully just bring it to light, and maybe it will help you guys avoid making them so that you guys can maximize your time on the water this fall. Now, the fall is my favorite time of the year for throwing walking baits, and the biggest reason for that is the fish transition out of summer and move into fall. As we get those colder nights, we get that colder water, that bait fish follows that cooler temp and they will start migrating to chase those cooler temperatures. Now, some of you guys live in big expansive areas that have big creek arms and rivers and channels, and you'll find that the shad and the bait fish will actually migrate up some of those creek arms. Other places, like out here out west, we don't have many of those. We have some, right, that have creek arms, but a lot of times we'll just have bigger coves or bays, places where as those nighttime temperatures cool, the bait fish will look for that colder water. So what happens a lot this time of the year is the nighttime temperatures cool and the surface temp is the coldest part of the water, and those bait fish will pull up and they'll seek that surface temp. And a lot of times that means slipping up shallow or migrating back into bays or creek arms or whatever. And so at night, the bait fish is following those cooler temps and they're moving tight to the shore. And what you guys, of course, see if you can wake up early enough to be out there at sunrise is a lot of mornings you will see fish just crashing bait up onto the shore. They're pushing them up on the bank. They're popping them, right? And that's not by random chance. It's not that a bass just woke up in the morning and all of a sudden it's like, dang, there's bait everywhere. This is great, right? Those bass followed those shad or that bait shallow, and they, made their, put a stake in the ground to their spot, and they wait for that sun to come up, and then they gorge, right? And so knowing that that's what happens will help you navigate some of these mistakes. Usually, most places, the morning bite starts very shallow. It could be bank related, it could be real shallow related, and then as that sun comes up, it may stay there if you get lucky, or it may kind of just push off a little bit more into slightly more open water, and then you may have some deeper water. The bass might wolf pack up, get into 5 or 10 fish little pods and chase bait together, and you'll see more open water popping. And then as the sun gets even higher, then a lot of times that bait might just kind of pull down and sink closer to the bottom, or find, that level of water where that light penetration isn't necessarily going through, right? So it's kind of not just a season of transition, but every day is almost a transition for us while we're on the water. And so understanding that will help you with your walking bait topwater game. Now, let's jump right in. I am going to talk about 3 mistakes. There's probably a million we could talk about. Really, we should just watch a video of Griff topwater fishing right now, and everybody can figure out all the mistakes. No offense, Griff. Fuck you. So let's get right into it. Here are 3 mistakes that hopefully you will avoid this topwater season. Let's start from the top. Mistake number one is only choosing one style of topwater bait. Okay, now there are a million different styles of topwater baits. Let me explain what I'm talking about. There are your traditional slicing style walking baits like a Sammy 100 or a Giant Dog X, you know, something like this. You know, Sammy 100 is one of the first walking topwater baits that I ever threw. Giant Dog X is an amazing one too. I kind of put those two in the same category. These are baits that are more slicing style baits. They're not real loud. They're not real intrusive. They just kind of slice right on the surface, just more finesse style walking baits, right? Other category in that type of bait would be a more of a knocking style, something like a Kicknocker or like a Diamante sonic slide, something like this. These style baits are going to have more of a louder knock to them, right? So these baits are going to have, you know, more of this loud sound. So they're designed as they move to create this really kind of type of sound, right? A little bit more violence on the surface and more call to them. Another style is, you know, pencil popper styles, right? So you hear us talk a lot about the Showerblows, about the Gunfish, you know, this style bait. You know, you take this style bait out. This has kind of a combination of, you know, popper, but still, you know, kind of a walking bait, but it's going to have a much wider movement to it. Okay, so just the shape of a pencil popper is usually more bulbous, so instead of it being more of a slicey movement, they're going to have more of a turn to it, right? What I'm getting at is a lot of times of the year, you know, as you're prepping for the morning, you're thinking, you know, what am I going to do tomorrow? Okay, should be able to catch them on a walking bait. Should be able to catch them on, you know, maybe a popper or buzz bait or some different topwaters. And a lot of times we tie on maybe just one walking bait, and sometimes that's good enough, right? But sometimes the fish are in different places, or the days are different, or even getting back to what the bait fish do and the bass do as the sun comes up and the day kind of navigates. Sometimes starting early with a bait like a Sammy is a great idea because it's something that you can fish shallow and stealthy with a pretty quiet approach. But then as the sun comes up and those fish start pulling off into a little deeper water, or maybe you get some wind and a little bit more noise, trying to throw a Sammy, you know, across a point that might be 10 or 15 or 20 feet deep where those fish have kind of pushed the bait off isn't necessarily the best bait. Right? So now you may be thinking, oh, I could keep catching them, but they're not eating it the same, and so you put the topwater down. Whereas if you would have just adjusted and transitioned to something that has a little bit more sound to it, right? Or a little bit bigger body that has more movement, now those fish can see it and hear it and react to it still in that deeper water, more open water, and you can extend your time out. Okay. Now, another thing to consider with these baits is not just necessarily the shift from something more stealthy to something more aggressive, but another trigger thing is sound, right? Each one of these baits has a different sound, okay? For instance, if we were talking about baits in this larger category, since I'm holding it, here's two that come to mind that I throw all the time. This is a Teckel Kicknocker. This is a Megabass Diamante sonic slide, okay? The sounds are different. Okay, so this one is going to have some glass in the top, and it's going to have this one kind of knock. So you're getting a little kind of dual combination of sound, right? This one is going to be a quieter shift, right? So gone is that high pitch, and it's back to just like a one kind of rolling shift. That sound can make a huge difference. It really kind of based on the day and what the bass want, right? So think of it a lot like us. I love a fillet. I will almost never say no. But if I ate a fillet 4 days in a row, dude, I want pasta.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the same thing. Like, you know, bass are feeding and eating, and sometimes they're just kind of weird creatures, and they wanted something consistently for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days in a row, and all of a sudden you're like, why aren't they eating this thing that they ate so good yesterday? But they're in the same area. Sometimes just making that little shift in sound is all you need to do, right? And this is across all categories. So even a category like pencil popper, for instance, right? So we were talking about the Evergreen Showerblows, right? This is like a one kind of deep pitch kind of knocking sound, similar to a Kicknocker. Well, within that category, you have the Teckel Slashkicker, which is going to give you even more sound. Right? You have a Lucky Craft Gunfish, which kind of blends a little bit of different sounds. So you hear a little bit of low and a little high, right? And then you have something like, the Ima, stick series that's real high pitch, right? So generally speaking, you want more of that high pitch sound when the water is colder. It mimics more of like when shad move and their bones are kind of making sound as they move. It's more of a high pitch like shad click. So that's generally the time that you'd go with that higher pitch. But it's not an exact science. You give them what they're eating, right? In another case, even going to a silent bait might be the key. And this is a big one in the fall for us. A lot of times people think, topwater season's over because they've been throwing nothing but a Kicknocker since summer, right? And so they've had the same Kicknocker tied on since June. All of a sudden we get to October, November, and they're not eating it the same. Well, this is a really intrusive, loud bait, which is amazing when this is the kind of bait they want. But sometimes they just want something stealthy. So going to something like a JT that has no sound, Duo makes a great one as well, and a silent pencil can really give you the look and let you still fish it, but not have that overly crazy sound. Don't be afraid to experiment. Build yourself a box, right? Try some different things out. Just because you have one style of loud, big bait doesn't mean that's the only one you need. So experiment, try some things. If they're not eating one, it could even just be a color shift, right? Maybe they're eating white for you consistently and all of a sudden one day they stop. Maybe going to something transparent or something shiny can make a difference. But mistake number one is not being versatile enough in your mental selection of walkie baits. Don't get just stuck in one style bait. Okay, mistake number two for me is lack of cadence. Okay, so this is another thing that we get stuck in a lot. A lot of times, some of us have been throwing topwater since post-spawn, right? So we've been doing this since March or April, and so we're 5-6 months into our topwater season, and we just get into some routines. We get into some habits. For the last 3 months, I've been able to throw this Kicknocker, and I've been able to just and just be a pretty lazy straight cadence of this thing, just walking back and forth. And if they stop eating it, then I say, okay, they're not eating topwater anymore. Okay, well, bass respond to cadence as much as they respond to profile, color, sound, right? All of these things. Cadence is critically important. So don't be afraid to experiment with cadence. If you're not getting bit, you have to have a starting point. Okay, and a starting point for me is generally a pretty just lazy, straightforward, just straight, walk and reel as I'm doing it. So the bait's just going boom, 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 right? But sometimes the fish need to be more aggressive. They need something moving faster to trigger them, right? They've seen a lot of walking baits over the last few months. Like, yeah, I've seen that. I've eaten that a few times. That's no good, right? But they're still feeding. There's still bait in the area. They're still chasing. So sometimes you need to change your cadence or go to a bait that offers a different cadence. Okay, this is a bait that I implement a lot in the fall. It's from Megabass. This is the Dog X Quick Walker. So this allows me to twitch my rod very quickly, and this bait to really fast move side to side. So it really looks like something escaping, right? Sometimes that escaping action is what they need to, create a trigger. Other times it's as simple as taking a bait even that you're using and maybe slowing it down. Okay, so instead of a big, just kind of steady cadence, maybe it's a, right? And slowing down that cadence and giving the fish time for it to just really sit over their heads and drive them crazy, and then boom, they get it, okay? If you guys live in areas where you have more than one species of bass, so if you live in an area where you have largemouth and smallmouth, or spots, smallmouth, largemouth, each one of those species sometimes will respond differently to different cadences, okay? So you might be in one arm and it might be full of spots and they might be eating it on a faster movement, and you go 10 miles away and it's largemouth and you're doing the same cadence and they won't touch it, right? You got to slow it down and you got to and they'll eat it, okay? So don't be afraid to play with cadence. Cadence is critically important, okay? So there's mistake number 2, is sticking with one cadence and not experimenting with your flow. All right, mistake number 3, and this is one that I get daily, is using the wrong line, okay? Now, wrong is a very strong word. If it's working for you and you're having fun and you're catching fish, then by all means, stick with what you're doing, okay? But we get this thing in our head where for most of our fishing anymore, the majority of us are using fluorocarbon line, right? That's because straight fluoro is kind of the 90% of what we do happens. And then we get to topwater season and all of a sudden people start asking, hey, what mono do I throw? And the reason for that is a mono floats real high, right? And fluoro is a neutral density, so it's going to have a sink rate to it, right? So if you throw straight fluoro to a walking bait and you make a big cast, you guys know that walking bait is going to start walking subsurface, right? It sinks. So many people try to switch from their fluoro to their mono or a copoly or some other type of line that's built to float. Now, if that works for you guys, then by all means do it, okay? However, the reason I'm putting this in the mistake category is that monos are just not built that strong. So if you've spent your whole year using fluoro and let's say you're using 16 or 20 pound fluoro and you switch to 16 or 20 pound mono, your instincts are going to be different, right? Your boat flipping, your pulling away from cover, all these things are going to need to be adjusted because mono is just not as abrasion resistant and strong as fluoro is. So you almost have to retrain your brain, okay? If you go to a copoly, now all of a sudden they're real stiff, they're hard to cast, right? So what I recommend, and this is the reason why it's in the mistake, is most people hear fluorocarbon and they go, oh, I can't do that on topwater. But without question, for me, this is the best topwater line, and this is a braid to fluoro leader combination. I'll talk about this, okay? So I like just you got to make sure it's a floating braid, okay? I like the Daiwa J-braid stuff, works great, but whatever braid you like is fine, okay? J-braid Grand. I like 65 pound or 50 pound. I like the heavier sizes because I feel like it floats better and it casts better and it backlashes less, but whatever you want to do is fine. And then I put it to a fluoro leader, either 16 or 20 pound. 20 usually, sometimes I'll even go up to 22 or 25. I'm fishing heavy cover. Now, why do I do this leader connection when I just said fluorocarbon sinks? Well, what I'm doing is I'm building maybe a 3-foot leader from my braid, okay? The reason I don't go straight braid to a walking bait for 2 reasons. The biggest reason is when you go straight braid to a walking bait, when these things cast, when you come back and you throw them, a lot of times these things will kind of flail like this in the wind, and if it catches your braid, it has a tendency for these hooks to dig in your braid, and then you're just cutting things off and you're digging your braid. It's not a lot of fun, right? So I like to build myself a 2 to 3 foot leader of fluoro here off of my braid to just give myself a more solid connection, and I reduce the wrapping of the line. Second reason is I fish a lot of clear water. So a lot of times the fish will get shy, right? And if they see that line going directly to the bait, a lot of times they'll shy away from it. But if I could build a 2 or 3 foot leader, or even a 4 foot leader off of it, then it gives it just enough of a buffer to where they'll eat it better, okay? Now, let's talk about fluoro and why going straight fluoro is making the bait sink. Fluorocarbon is neutral density, right? So if this is the surface of the water, and here's you, okay, you're on a boat, and then here's your cast. So you throw the cast poof, over here, right? If your line floats, it's going to stay right here on the surface, okay? But if your line's neutral density like fluorocarbon, what happens is as you're walking, so you're twitching your bait, that line is slowly sinking down, okay? So you're going to create a belly of that line from your rod tip. It's going to sink in the middle, and it goes up to the bait. So what happens is it's this middle part that's sinking, that as you're twitching, it's pulling the bait down, okay? Now, let's go to a braid. If it's a floating braid, same thing. This is you. This is your cast, right? Your braid is floating high the entire time, okay? So there's no belly sinking down here that's pulling it. It's staying high. So if all you have is a little 3 or 4 foot piece of fluoro, it's a walking bait, right? So it's moving. This little 3 foot piece isn't like sinking, right? It's not doing anything other than moving the bait, okay? This isn't the problem. It's the line 40, 50 foot that way that's the problem that's sinking it. So by going braid to fluoro, it lets you stay in the lines that you're used to. It lets you stay in that solid connection, and you can have a lot more success. All right, guys, so there you go. There are 3 mistakes to avoid this fall when using topwater walking baits. It's one of the funnest ways to fish, and I know you guys love doing this as much as we do here. So hopefully those mistakes will maybe resonate and maybe prevent you from making those same mistakes. Of course, I love this to be one giant community, so if there are mistakes that I didn't bring up that you have found yourself making that you've worked through and you want to, just share with us so that other people don't make those, please drop them down below. I want us to all be able to learn from each other and become better fishermen and have more fun on the water. So if you guys have questions on anything, of course, you can drop it down below in the comments. I leave my Instagram handle at the beginning of every episode, so if you don't see this episode like right as it drops, find me on Instagram. It's easier. That way I pretty much live there, and happy to help diagnose anything that's happening. We'll throw some links to some different topwater categories if you guys want to check them out. But on behalf of myself and David and, Griff, thank you guys. Thank you for watching these videos, and thank you for your business. We really appreciate the community and being able to hang out and, share ideas like this. So until next time, enjoy the fall topwater season. Have fun. Don't make any mistakes. All right, we will see you again soon. Peace for now. Later.